out of the red corner, an undefeated mixed martial artist holding a perfect professional record.
What's up, squad? This Saturday, October 12th, is UFC Vegas 98, Royval versus Taira. This will be my full card breakdown and prediction. Timestamps will be in the description. Let's not waste any more time. Let's get into it. First fight, we have Clayton Carpenter versus Lucas Rocha at flyweight. Clayton Carpenter is 28 years old, 7-0, obviously 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'6" with a 68-inch reach, 71% finish rate, and he's a minus 175 favorite. Lucas Rocha is 24 years old, 17-1, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'3" with a 64-inch reach, 78% finish rate, and he's a plus 145 underdog. Both guys in this fight are very early in their careers. Carpenter has 1 fight in the UFC, and Rocha is making his UFC debut. Rocha has some big power in his hands for a flyweight with 10 KOs and 17 fights. I think the height and reach of Carpenter will give him some trouble. However, I think he's a very live dog in this fight. But with that said, I am going to go with Carpenter by decision. Next fight, we have Dan Argueta versus Cody Haddon at bantamweight. Dan Argueta is 31 years old, 9-2, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'7" with a 68-inch reach, 55% finish rate, and he's a plus 155 underdog. Cody Haddon is 26 years old, 7-1, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'7" with a 69-inch reach, 88% finish rate, and he's a minus 185 favorite. So Cody Haddon is making his UFC debut. His one loss is a decision loss to Steve Ercik 3 years ago. Seeing such a high-quality opponent on his young resume, especially going to decision, tells me he has some ability. On the flip side, Argueta has won 1 fight in the last 3 years. I think Argueta is in a tough spot here, so I'm going to go with Haddon by decision. Next fight, we have Julia Polastri versus Corey McKenna at strawweight. Julia Polastri is 26 years old, 12-4, 4-1 in her last 5 fights. She's 5'2" with a 63-inch reach and a 44% finish rate. Corey McKenna is 25 years old, 3-2 in her last 5 fights. She's 5'3", with a 59-inch reach and a 36% finish rate. Corey McKenna is 25 years old, 8-3, 3-2 in her last 5 fights. She's 5'3", with a 59-inch reach and a 36% finish rate. In this fight, Julia Polastri, I think she's going to come out and she's going to fight at a pretty fast pace. She lands over 5 significant strikes per minute. I think McKenna's going to try to use her grappling, but for me, this is really a coin flip fight. So ultimately, I'm going to go with Polastri by decision. Next fight, we have Junior Tafa versus Sharaf at heavyweight. Junior Tafa is 28 years old, 5-3, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 6'3" with a 72-inch reach and a 63% finish rate. Sharaf is 31 years old, 4-0. He's 6'2" with a 100% finish rate. So Sharaf is making his UFC debut on a few days' notice. He last fought on September 6th. This is a really tough spot to be in, especially coming in and you're facing such a power puncher, and we don't know if he's been in the gym, if he's still in pretty good shape. So I think that cardio is going to be kind of worrisome. But ultimately, I'm going to go Junior Tafa by KO. Next fight, we have Themba Gorimbo versus Niko Price at welterweight. Themba Gorimbo is 33 years old, 13-4, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 6'1" with a 77-inch reach, 47% finish rate, and he's a minus 280 favorite. Niko Price is 35 years old, 16-7, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 6 feet tall with a 76-inch reach, 57% finish rate, and he's a plus 225 underdog. I think in this fight, we get 2 guys that are polar opposites. Gorimbo wants to fight at a slower pace and uses grappling, whereas Niko Price wants to get after it straight away and scrap on the feet. Price does get hit a lot as he absorbs 5.7 significant strikes per minute. He has okay takedown defense at 62%. I think his chin is taking quite a bit of damage. So with that, I think Gorimbo is going to take him down early and eventually get a finish. So I'm going to go with Gorimbo by TKO. Next fight, we have Jonathan Pearce versus Pat Sabatini at featherweight. Jonathan Pearce is 32 years old, 14-6, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He's 6 feet tall with a 71-inch reach, 55% finish rate, and he's a -135 favorite. Pat Sabatini is 33 years old, 18-5, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'8" with a 70-inch reach, 57% finish rate, and he's a +110 underdog. In this fight, I think we're going to see a lot of clinching and grappling between those two. Pearce is more of a wrestler, and Sabatini is the BJJ practitioner. I think Pearce will get some takedowns and will be on top, but he will need to be very careful not to get too comfortable in Sabatini's guard. Pearce may also choose to keep this on the feet, as Sabatini's coming off a brutal KO loss to Diego Lopez. I think this fight will end up being a grappler's delight, though. I'm very unsure here, but I'm going to go with Jonathan Pearce by decision. Next fight, we have CJ Vergara versus Ramazan Temirov at flyweight. CJ Vergara is 33 years old, 12-5-1, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'6" with a 68-inch reach, 39% finish rate, and he's a +210 underdog. Ramazan Temirov is 27 years old, 17-2, 5-0 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'5" with a 58% finish rate, and he's a -265 favorite. So Ramazan is making his UFC debut, and he's got some big power in his hands for flyweight. I think this fight will play out in the feet as Vergara shoots no takedowns. I think this fight should be fun. As CJ fights at a high pace, he lands over 5.2 significant strikes per minute. However, he also absorbs 4.6 significant strikes per minute, and I think that's not going to serve him well in this fight, as Ramazan has some power. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Ramazan by TKO. Next fight, we have Njokuani versus Jared Gooden at welterweight. Njokuani is 35 years old, 23-10, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 6'3" with an 80-inch reach, 46% finish rate, and he's a -185 favorite. Jared Gooden is 30 years old, 23-9, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He's 6 feet tall with a 77-inch reach, 56% finish rate, and he's a +150 underdog. I think this is going to be a very interesting fight. I can see it being a little slower paced as both guys possess some power. I think the threat will make both guys a bit more patient. I do like Chitty at welterweight better than I did at middleweight. Chitty he's been there with slightly better competition, but this is another fight I'm split on. Ultimately, I'm going to go with Chitty and Njokuani by decision. Next fight, we have Abdul Razak Alhassen versus Josh Fremd at middleweight. Razak Alhassen is 39 years old, 12-6, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'10" with a 73-inch reach, 67% finish rate, and he's a -150 favorite. Josh Fremd is 30 years old, 11-6, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. 6'4" with a 76-inch reach, 47% finish rate, and he's a +125 underdog. In this fight, I think Fremd he will need to use his length and fight behind his jab and leg kicks. Razak Alhassen will have a huge power advantage. Unfortunately, Fremd doesn't really fight at range very often. He tends to get in the clinch. And for me, I just think that's a bad recipe for this matchup with Razak Alhassen. So I'm going to end up going Razak Alhassen by KO. Next fight, we have Daniel Rodriguez versus Alex Morono at welterweight. D-Rod is 37 years old, 17-5, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 6'1" with a 74-inch reach, 55% finish rate, and he's a -205 favorite. Alex Morono is 34 years old, 24-10, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'11" with a 72-inch reach, 38% finish rate, and he's a +170 underdog. I really like D-Rod's boxing, Morono has more of a funky style and uses a lot of footwork and movement. I think D-Rod's use of combinations will be his path to victory in this fight. I also think Morono's footwork, not staying in the pocket too long, mixing up his strikes with the punches, the kicks, body work will be his path to victory. But ultimately, I'm going to go D-Rod by decision. Next fight, we have Grant Dawson versus Rafa Garcia at lightweight. Grant Dawson is 30 years old, 21-2-1, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'10" with a 72-inch reach, 71% finish rate, and he's a minus 400 favorite. Rafa Garcia is 30 years old, 16-3, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'7" with a 70-inch reach, 47% finish rate, and he's a plus 300 underdog. I think in this fight, Grant Dawson is going to come out and implement his wrestling and grappling. I think he'll rack up some control time on Garcia, use a little ground and pound to hold Garcia down and keep the position. I don't think he gets the finish on Garcia, but I see him just using a lot of that control time in the wrestling to getting himself to a decision. So ultimately, Grant Dawson by decision. Next fight, we have Brad Tavares versus Jun-Young Park at middleweight. Tavares is 36 years old, 20-9, 2-3 in his last 5 fights. He's 6'1" with a 74-inch reach, 23% finish rate, and he's a plus 145 underdog. Park is 33 years old, 17-6, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'10" with a 73-inch reach, 48% finish rate, and he's a minus 170 favorite. I think Tavares will start out fast using his jabs and leg kicks. Park is a very tough guy, and he hangs around and he finds ways to win tough fight. He's solid everywhere the fight takes place. Tavares can slow down a little bit in his fights, and Park has some low-key solid grappling as well. These two guys can hold their own pretty much anywhere the fight goes, but ultimately, I like Jun-Young Park by decision. Then we have the main event, Brandon Royval versus Tatsuro Taira at flyweight. Brandon Royval is 32 years old, 16-7, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He's 5'9" with a 70.5-inch reach, 57% finish rate, and he's a plus 165 underdog. Tatsuro Taira is 24 years old, 16 5'7", with a 70-inch reach, 75% finish rate, and he's a minus 200 favorite. I think this fight will be a tough matchup for Taira, as I think Royval will have a speed and a striking advantage on the feet. In the grappling, I think Taira will have a technical advantage, but Royval forces scrambles very well, and he's also very fast, and you can kind of get caught up in the chaos of all the scrambles. If Taira isn't careful making the right decisions in the grappling sequences, he could quickly find himself in trouble. Brandon Royval is a very, very live underdog in this fight, but ultimately I'm going to go Tatsuro Taira by submission. I'm ready for a new title challenger at flyweight. Let me know what you guys think. Any feedback or comments are always appreciated. Subscribe to the channel, and until next time.